I think most of us are aware that the origin of the concept that human life is sacred is found in the very opening chapters of the Old Testament, where the creation account of the human race is qualified and explained with the idea that in creation God stamps His personal image on every human being. In theology, we call that the concept of the imago Dei, or the image of God in man. So that God creates human beings in His own image and in His own likeness. This does not mean that God creates us as little gods or junior grade deities. We may like to entertain that idea from time to time, but that's not the concept here. We are creatures, we're finite, dependent, derived, and all of those things, but nevertheless, every human being, no matter how corrupt or how virtuous, has that indelible mark of his Creator impressed upon his very soul, that in certain ways he is like his Creator, that he has been given a capacity to mirror and to reflect the very character of God, even though, as I'm quick to add, we are not God. Now, the significance of that is immediately pressed home when the issue of capital punishment arises as early as the 9th chapter of Genesis, where the Scripture gives a law establishing capital punishment in the case of what we would call today in our culture murder in the first degree. Murder that is premeditated with malice aforethought and all of that, in which we have heard this text several times, that if by man's blood is shed, so by man shall his blood be shed. That is not a prediction or a future prophecy, a proverbial insight that would say something like, those who live by the sword will die by the sword, but rather the literary structure of that text has it as an imperative. God is saying that if a person willfully kills another human being, then that person forfeits his life and is to be executed. That's the law then that was reiterated at Sinai, where, as we read the several laws of the Jewish commonwealth in the Old Testament, that God says in the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not kill, meaning thou shalt not murder. And then in Exodus 21 and 22 and so on, he gives his legislation to deal with punishing those who violate the Decalogue. And so the penalty God enjoins for murder is a capital punishment. Now, if we go back to Genesis 9, the biblical rationale is given, and this, of course, is not intended to be a discussion of capital punishment. That's another issue that divides us seriously and warrants a whole series on its own. But in Genesis 9, the rationale for capital punishment is, as it says, if you shed the blood of man, by man shall your blood be shed, because man is created in the image of God. In other words, what that means, ladies and gentlemen, is that God is saying here that human life is so sacred that an attack upon a human being is regarded by God as an attack upon himself. Because any malicious attack on a human being is an attack upon one who bears the image of God. He is an image bearer. And that also means that the dignity that we have is a dignity that doesn't rest on our own preference. You know, some cynical philosophers say the only reason we esteem men is because we are men. And we like to think that we have some kind of value and that there's some significance to our existence. But the biblical message is that man has dignity because God not only creates him, but because God assigns and declares that every human being has value, that every human life is sacred. Now that theme is not just found in the ancient pages of Genesis or in the arcane elements of Mosaic legislation. Ladies and gentlemen, it's on every page. From Old Testament through the New Testament, the overarching message is that human life is profoundly sacred. Just one other reminder quickly comes from the teaching of Jesus in the most famous sermon ever preached, the Sermon on the Mount in the 5th chapter of Matthew. Jesus makes this comment to his hearers. He said, "You have heard that it was said of them of old time, 'Thou shalt not kill,' and whosoever shall kill shall be in danger of the judgment." Now hear what Jesus said. "But I say to you that whoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. Whoever shall say to his brother, Raca, shall be in danger of the council. Whoever shall say, you fool, shall be in danger of hellfire." That's one of the strongest statements that Jesus ever made in his ethical teaching. And what's he saying here? He's saying, don't think that you've obeyed the law of God if you've restrained yourself from committing murder in the first degree. That the deeper implications of the prohibition against murder carries an elliptical, unspoken, tacitly assumed assertion of its opposite. That is, what Jesus is saying here is, you are not allowed to kill people, and that means you're not only allowed not to murder them in the first degree, you are not allowed even to be angry at them unjustly. You're not even allowed to hurt the quality of life that they enjoy. You're not allowed to slander them because their lives are sacred. And the idea that the church has always understood in the teaching of Jesus is that what the law teaches in its affirmation, it also teaches in its denial. It's opposite. That is, if Jesus says you must not kill or do anything that's part of the complex of killing, at the same time you are called to do everything in your power to promote human life. To love your neighbor, which promotes the quality of his life. To give mercy to those who are in need of mercy, to give clothing to the naked and food to the hungry and shelter to those without shelter, to visit the imprisoned. All of that is part of the complex of the law of the sanctity of life. That's the driving force behind the whole ethic of Jesus, that all of life is sacred. So it's not simply that you're not allowed to murder, you can't hate, you can't be angry without cause, and so on.